welcome everybody. It has been a very long break, but we are back. And I bet you're wondering who the fuck you're talking to. Well, it's That One Podcast, except we're switching it up a little bit. We have a very, very special guest. He's my friend, the IT god of cake, the one, the only, Mark. Welcome, Mark.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whenever you're listening to this. Hello, everyone.
So it is going to be very confusing if you aren't familiar with me because you got Mark and Marvin, you got the Eminem special. But I think Edson said, we'll melt in your mouth, not in your hands joke. But I told him I can make no promises on that front.
I don't know, I think the weather's right for that, but
Yeah.
We'll give it our best shot.
There's certain conditions, there's humidity at play. I mean, who is he to tell us where we're gonna melt? He took our agency away, as it were.
Look, the important thing is that if you're calling our names, just say Mar, and then trail off at the end, and that'll just make us both like super confused. We'll just poke our heads up like meerkats. Will be like, what?
I come from a household of children with M's names. There was me, my brother Michael, and my cousin Marcus, and now my niece, her name is Malaya. Everybody we're like fucking meerkats. When someone says an M letter, everybody just pops up and looks over like, you talking to me? Is that for me? And so when one of us would get in trouble, my mom would just yell all the names, and everybody just stops, and then she just points at the one she wants. And sometimes she meant the whole gang, but you just get used to it. But
hey, it's like any family, and it makes it a little bit easier if you got all names with one letter, because in my family it was always that thing where the parents would like be trying to yell at one kid and their brain wouldn't really like figure out who they were talking about, so they'd like yell my sister's name, and my mom would yell my sister's name, she'd mean me, and so on and so forth. Sometimes she'd yell for my name, but she'd say the dog's name. So yeah. Oh
yeah, that makes for a difficult situation. Then she gets even more mad because you made her yell the wrong name. Oh yeah, I can understand that. So
yeah.
But yeah,
parents are hard to understand,
This is true. One would say they don't understand, but that's argumentum. So before we get started, I want to get the pleasantries out of the way. We haven't been updating any platforms for a while, so I'm gonna shell them out. You got the Instagram and Twitter at That One Pod. You got the email podthat@gmail.com. You got the Pippa page, which has almost everything listed on it, including the Discord, which you should join because I'm actually going to start using it a little bit more, which is shows.pippa.io/that the number one podcast, all one word. And if you don't know that by now, you're an asshole. So Mark, go ahead, and I know you got a little Twitch thing going on. Let the people know where they can find you at as well.
Yeah, so don't have much of a social media presence, or at least not one I want to share. So, but I do play games, not on a super regular schedule, but I like to play them. I am a dad who probably has no business playing games, but I do so anyway because that's what I do. And I have a Twitch channel. It is at Tycoonatic, TYCOONATIC. And you can get to that with, I think it's just twitch.tv/Tycoonatic. And really that's all I got to share right now. I have to figure out what else is out there for me
cool. Well, I'll give you time
to the public.
I'll give you time towards the end of the episode if there's some more information you want to give. But also, too, just for anybody who's like, how do I type that? I will have links in the show notes for anyone who is interested, just to make life a little bit easier. So, there's a lot of stuff we can cover, but because we've been gone for a while. But I'm going to try to make this simple on not only you, but me as well. And we're going to try to talk on the most recent topics that actually matter to us. So, the very first thing we're going to talk about is basically sort of we got a double story. That's right. If we're going to start out after a long break, we're going with a twofer. And that's talking about CBS All Access Pass. So, first thing first, we've sort of talked about this before. For those of you who aren't familiar, and this is where a lot of TV content providers are going, which is rather than using a platform like Netflix or Hulu or whatever to shell their wares on us, they are choosing to basically focus on their own platform. Fuck. Even Disney, which I say even Disney as if like, oh, little old Disney's doing it, but Disney is pretty much going to try to rule the internet with their own shit. But regardless, CBS All Access Pass is something similar. The problem with CBS All Access Pass when it first came out, there wasn't any reason to get it. Yeah, you got to watch all the other CBS shows that were actively out, and I think they had a back catalog, but I mean, who really wants to go see the first season of NCIS? You could just turn to Spike TV and it'll come on eventually. You know what I mean? But nonetheless, they had one show which has been a darling of the show, which is Star Trek Discovery. And Star Trek Discovery is a very, very, very entertaining show. It's a nice modern take on Star Trek while still having the feel of old Star Trek. And I think we were talking earlier, Mark, you said you haven't seen the new Star Trek Discovery yet, correct?
Not yet, and it's primarily because of what we were talking about. So with the like the CBS All Access and all that kind of stuff. Now, first thing I'll say is that I am not looking forward to TV in like 5 years when basically I have to keep track of 50 different streaming services that I have to pay for from every different provider. Yep. But the thing with Star Trek is now I like Star Trek. I watched a lot of Next Generation. I watched a lot of Deep Space Nine and Voyager. Didn't really catch Enterprise. I've been told that it wasn't a great loss, even though Scott Bakula's the man.
I agree.
But with this one, I mean, really the main reason was like this is on its own separate kind of thing that I have to subscribe to separately. And I'm not going to subscribe to something if there's only one thing that I'm aware of and if I don't have like a significant interest in it. But based on some of the news that's been coming out lately, I might actually be a lot more interested in subscribing to it or figuring out how to subscribe to it, just because, this will give me an opportunity to basically finally catch up and watch Star Trek Discovery, and more importantly, for my wife to watch it because she's the huge Star Trek fan, even bigger than I am. So
yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned the Star Trek shows that you think of when you first think of Star Trek, because I have a lot of friends that were really big into OG Star Trek, and I thought OG Star Trek was okay. I'm not a we've had this discussion. I'm not one to hark on nostalgia, but I like when they take an old IP and put a twist on it that's engaging and it's respectful of the old show, but it's also doing its sort of new thing. And the problem that I had a lot was they always tried to it always felt like there was a lot of innovation going on the newer shows, whether they were better or not, is always up to discussion. But the thing that
I think we're dealing with two different things here. So we're dealing with like all the people who are trying to make reboots, and the balancing between like a reboot and like an update or a new show. And I know that Star Trek has like two universes, right? They've got like the Kelvin timeline and the regular timeline, and they've probably got some others that I'm not aware of. But basically, it's like it really is a balancing act between like what you're saying is like being respectful to the material and not just kind of like only giving people a reboot. I do like that you've got the movie universe, right? And then you've got the TV universe, which they're keeping, as far as I know, I believe they're keeping it in the same kind of timeline / universe as the older shows.
That's the feeling. So that's the fun thing is with Discovery, it takes place in the time of I want to say OG Star Trek. Wait, what am I saying? I think Actually, I can't remember. It's been so long. This is the problem. It's been so long since I've seen the show. I think it's literally been a year, or not a year, but like beginning of the year is when the season wrapped up.
Yeah, you were telling me it's been a while too.
And so I can't quite remember. But I think it's more in line with being in between OG Star Trek and Next Generation Star Trek. So there's that aspect of it, like you were sort of talking about.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I heard about that kind of threw some people off about the previous show, Enterprise, was you had a show that took place, I think, before, like it was a prequel to even the original series, and that's super difficult to do when you're talking about something that is 50 years later, right? And the technology has changed, and you're going to have ships that look so much more advanced, so much more futuristic than the old, Enterprise, original Enterprise models and things like that. I think that it's also made a lot more difficult because Star Trek itself is a very kind of shiny utopian future kind of thing, and everything has this particular look. I think it works. We're like, I hate to do the Star Trek and Star Wars argument, but I think it worked a little better with Star Wars, at least with these most recent films, because that universe is just kind of like, it's kind of gritty and it's kind of dirty, and you can kind of futz the look of things by basically just kind of covering him in this the same kind of layer of I don't even know what the word is I'm looking for, but basically that same kind of...
It's basically just grittiness, right? Like there's like a grittiness to it.
And the thing is, and especially when you can use the same, you're using the same ships or you're using updated versions of the same models. So for the most part, I think that's worked out. I don't think it really worked with the prequels because that was all CGI, but that's a topic in and of itself.
Yeah.
But I think that was the second part that I was alluding to earlier that makes it a little difficult, would make it a little difficult for these guys. But I'm actually looking forward to sometime soon actually checking out Discovery.
Yeah. And again, so I just pulled it up just so I can make sure I was right on this. So just to give you an idea of what the pricing was, it's $5.99 a month for CBS All Access with limited commercials. So that means you still get, and obviously, to each his own their opinion about how they feel about limited commercials in general. But if you wanted to get a full commercial free, which to be fair, you do with CBS All Access, you do get access to the live feed of CBS as well, although it's free, so I don't know why I would pay for that. But for commercial free, and also too, you can't obviously get rid of commercials on the live feed, but that's neither here nor there. It's still $9.99 a month. So that would have been $9.99 a month for one show, which is kind of a hard ask, especially for something that, was a new IP that everybody pretty much had doubts about, right? Because let's be honest, in the age of, reboots and pseudo reboots, which we'll get into this a little bit more here in a moment, it's hard to voluntarily spend money on something that you don't know if you can trust or not.
Well, and that's just it. It's that classic situation of what is your money worth to you, right?
Exactly.
There's so many instances where people argue. You have one side that's like, how do I justify spending the money on this? And the other side is like, well, it's worth it to me, right? And there's so many instances. I mean, one of the most recent ones is like the thing with Nintendo setting up their, starting payment for their online service. That's an example. Everybody had gotten it for free for a while, and then it's like, is this worth it for me to pay for it? Same kind of thing here. If this, this is also the argument that I used to have with Hulu, because I would pay for Hulu and I would get commercials. And my ape brain was basically like, why get ads when paying for thing? But how much stuff was I watching, and how much do I pay for cable, and all this kind of stuff. So it's just it's a situation that this kind of thing pops up in just everywhere. Like how much is something worth to you? How much are you willing to pay for that item that has no real monetary value, but has a huge amount of collector value. It could go on and on.
Yeah, but that's the point, right? Is there has to be enough meat on the bones to want to bring you in to even give it a shot. But that takes me to the before we get done with that, the one thing I did want to point out, the reason we bring it up is with it being fall, that means new shows are going to be coming out. So Star Trek Discovery isn't back yet, but they are going to start doing what they're calling their mini webisodes, and basically these are going to be stories that, for anyone who isn't familiar with mini webisodes for shows like these, they're stories that are definitely part of the universe and therefore can be part of the retcon, but they are not ones that are necessarily enhancing the plot and storylines necessarily. They're usually ones that give you a deeper idea of how the universe is and character development in a different way. But it's they're gonna start October 4th. And they're going to be monthly. And again, because the shows are going to be back for so long. The 4th of October, 8th of November, 6th of December, and 3rd of January are going to be the individual dates of episodes. So for anyone who's interested in seeing the show without necessarily wanting to sign up for CBS All Access, this actually might be a pretty decent way to at least see what the show's all about. I will say, obviously, you're probably going to be ruining a little bit of the, not plot, because it's not going to be anything involved with that. But, if you don't like any sort of spoilers, obviously I would avoid that sort of thing. But if you are interested and you're willing to take a risk, I honestly do recommend checking it out, because more people need to know about this show, because I do not want it canceled.
Exactly.
And
it's a good way to be introduced to the characters.
Absolutely.
It looks like from what I've been reading about this, but it's it's also one of those things where it's kind of like, are you the type of person who likes to be introduced to the characters as they go in the show? I think it's a fantastic idea, especially for people who watch the show. Look, if we all sit down and think about how a TV show is made and how much work goes into it and how much time it takes, and all the other stuff that actors are doing, and just all the little bits that go into making something like this, you start to understand why there are long breaks. Sometimes you don't understand why they're as long as they are.
Yeah.
but the when you have shows that have these long breaks in between, to be able to get something like this is always a boon. I mean, like, one of the shows that is notorious for this is Steven Universe. And Steven Universe, it'll end on these. It'll be this amazing show, and it'll end on these cliffhangers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it'll just be like, okay, big cliffhanger. Now the show will be back. We don't know when. And what they used to do is they used to do these like little web-based shorts, like these little tiny little like 5-minute like little songs, or little mini-sodes, so to speak, with like a different art style. They used to do something like that, and that was really, really nice for fans of the show. I think it's the same kind of thing here. If you're a fan of the show, at least it gives you something to hold on to, and to just kind of be like, okay, well, at least I got a little bit of my fix.
Yeah,
it's going to be a while before I can have the next one. But
it sort of hits the reset button for you, right? Like, it's, you have to wait still, but at the same time too, just getting a taste. Like, and I will say this, I'm not one to watch repeat episodes of shows very often. That's not to say I won't watch them ever, but the show either has to be, that particular episode has to be either really, really good, or it's sort of background noise, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But even getting like a 5 to 15 minute mini episode is enough new content for my brain to go, oh, look at us, we got a new episode, I'm happy, and I can survive for however long I need to, So I think it's really cool that they're doing this, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they produce because, and I will say this, it makes sense that there is going to be such time between seasons, considering there are shows that it doesn't really take much to put into production and they can sort of pump them out when they need to, like kind of and not to be disrespectful to the show, you can like it or not, but shows like The Big Bang Theory, there isn't a lot of change in production that is necessary, right? It's just, hey, everybody just needs a break, we'll come back when our break's over. But for shows like like this show or even Game of Thrones, right? There's so much that goes into production. This isn't a show you're just going to be cranking out an episode each week. And
Well, it's not the same thing as a sitcom, right? Like a sitcom has a set. It's a set stage, right? And unless they have to like take it down and break it down and put it back up, after every season, in a sitcom or something like that, something that takes something slice of life, sort of like Big Bang Theory is the example that you used. I mean, it's got like 4 set pieces, and they're all basically they're all super easy. But I brought up Steven Universe earlier. It's animation. Any of these animated shows, I think Gravity Falls had the same issues. Yeah. Any of these animated shows, I mean, animation is a lot of work. It takes a long time, right? So, and the same kind of thing here. You've got a big sci-fi, drama action show with a bunch of set pieces and special effects and all this kind of stuff, and this is the kind of place where I expect that sort of that sort of delay to happen. And when the delay, you just kind of have to figure out, it's like, what is the level of delay that you can stand? And hey, if for those people who don't have a very high level of delay that they can stand, boom, minisodes.
Yeah. And to be fair too, if I'm remembering right, I believe there was, the typical first season, the second season pain points that you get, which is you don't know if you're going to have the same group, coming in, and maybe there's scheduling issues, because a lot of people, they don't put all their eggs in one basket for a show like this, right? Like they go, okay, I want to be back, but if it doesn't fall through, I can't cancel other work,
Plus you have to deal with the fact that a lot of these shows don't know if they're going to have another season.
Exactly.
Right? Like they'll finish a season and they'll be like, well, are we going to start recording the next one? And they're just like, yeah, we haven't actually gotten the okay yet. So I have watched shows religiously in the past where it runs for 3 or 4 seasons and it's got the same cast and it's got this ongoing story, and then they basically you get to the 5th season and like 3 of the main characters are gone. They have to write them out.
Community.
Yeah, exactly.
Community is a popular example that happened, and they ended up going to Yahoo, which is Yahoo picked them up, and I think nowadays that's when Netflix picks up a show like that, or maybe Hulu. But the problem is I mean, this has happened. This has happened forever too, right? So it's like, oh, absolutely. I mean, you can go back years. It happened in the '90s. It happened in the '90s with Babylon 5. It happened in the '80s with what was that called? One Day at a Time, I think, was a sitcom, and like one of the actresses just was so hopped up on cocaine all the time that they had to fire her, and she was one of the main characters. All the 80s.
Yeah.
Even like 10 Rules of Dating My Daughter, John Ritter passed, and they had this really popular show, and they didn't want to cancel it, and so they moved on. Hell, even now we have it where Roseanne, she loses her shit, and they decided, well, okay, this show still is popular, although why it's popular is a whole nother story. But they go, this show still is popular, we want to keep doing it, so they're going to bring it back sans Roseanne and call it The Counters. So, it's... And I think with this show, I think they even had it where they lost their showrunner. That's huge for a show like this. A showrunner can make or break your whole experience. So, I'm going to be patient because I just want it to stay. I don't want it to go away. Because the nice thing, the feeling I got from this show is it had a very Battlestar Galactica feel in a good way, right? Where the production value was so high, the acting quality was so high, and the story was so engaging that you wanted to see more of it, and it's very rare to get that, and I don't want it to be canceled.
Even having not seen it, this is a show that I have history with, or not a show, but this is a series that I have history with. This is a series that has a lot of great, it just has a great place in pop culture, right?
Absolutely.
And in fiction. And I really like, even if I never watched this show, I would want to see it have a 7, 8, 9 year run, like Next Generation had, like Deep Space Nine had. I want to see this series continue to succeed. It's had its ups, it's had its downs, but it's still going, more than 50 years later. Yeah. And that's a testament to the power of the universe that Gene Roddenberry created, the characters that he and Rick Berman and all these guys have created, the stories that they've created, the world that they've created. Great world building. I mean, that's where it is. That's why so many people love Harry Potter. I mean, Harry Potter has absolutely nothing original in it, but it's great world building, right? Game of Thrones. I mean, just you name it. You have a great universe for people to escape into, and this is a big example.
Exactly. But again, we were talking about why CBS All Access would be more intriguing. Well, there's a reason for that. So this came out maybe a week or two ago, but they are going to be rebooting another, and I don't know if this technically is a reboot, but because of the format, but they're going to be rebooting another one of their IPs, which is the Twilight Zone.
Yes,
and it's going to be hosted by one Jordan Bell. For those of you who don't know who Jordan Bell is, or Jordan Peele. Wow, Jordan Bell is a basketball player. Jordan Peele is who I'm referencing, and Jordan Peele is from the infamous duo of Key and Peele, and also won award-winning movie.
Yes, Academy Award winner Jordan Peele.
Exactly. I should say his proper name.
Yes, it's like the American version of Sir.
Exactly. This is all we got here is trophies. Because that sounds exactly like America. You get to be a knight in the UK. Here, win a fucking trophy, and that's how we'll refer to you.
That's right. As long as it's not a participation trophy, we'll be good.
Exactly. But it's from the movie Get Out. And if you haven't seen Get Out, you need to get out and watch that movie because that movie's fucking amazing. But nonetheless, again, this is another show that if you're going to make me pay for CBS All Access, this is a good way of doing it.
And this is something that I was alluding to earlier. I mean, here, look, The Twilight Zone is, in my opinion, the greatest TV show that is ever, the original with Rod Serling, one of the greatest, it is the greatest TV show that has ever been on, in my opinion. I have so many memories of sitting, as a kid, sitting down and watching Twilight Zone marathons on Channel 5 in Los Angeles every 4th of July, just watching as many as I possibly could. I own like all the episodes on DVD. It is a fantastic show. They've tried to reboot it a number of times to varying degrees of success, and by varying I mean from not successful at all to pretty much not successful at all.
Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah, and I never really paid enough attention to figure out why that is. I have a lot of hope for this because, well, for no reason other than with Get Out, Jordan Peele. Jordan Peele was a great is a great comedian. Yeah. And he's shown his directing, his filmmaking chops. And I believe he's like producing this series, and he's going to be the narrator. He's basically taking the Serling spot. And one of the things I've noticed in recent years, which has made me super happy, is you got a lot of folks out there that are kind of known for one thing and then do something else as kind of another project and are super good at it. Peele has shown that he can do that already. Absolutely. And so I'm actively looking forward to seeing what he can do with this. I mean, great example of that. That is the recent Cosmos series with Neil deGrasse Tyson. That was produced by the guy who makes Family Guy, Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah, MacFarlane.
I mean, this is a guy who basically like.
That guy does literally everything.
He does everything, but what people know him for is pee-pee caca humor.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and he went off and made this superb new vision and version of one of the greatest documentary series of all time. And I don't know what this new show is going to be like, but I have great hopes for it.
Well, and so I kind of have two things I want to sort of splinter off to. The first thing is, I was one of those people. Again, I don't hark on nostalgia, but I really enjoyed the Twilight Zone. When I was younger, my mom and dad got divorced. The guy my dad was dating, the guy my mom was dating, was really into Twilight Zone, and I had watched some of it on my own. But he had not necessarily the whole collection, but a large, substantial portion of it. And so, like, if it was a random Saturday afternoon and there's not shit on TV, we just watched the Twilight Zone, and I got to appreciate it even more because there was episodes I hadn't seen. Because a lot of times, what happens when they show reruns is they show the same reruns, right? Because they don't want to pay for the rights for different episodes, especially for a show that old. But the one thing I'm hoping, and I don't know to what extent this is going to happen, is I want Jordan Peele to be involved in some part of the creation process outside of just solely narration and host of the show. I think he has a lot to bring to the table, and if you're only using him in that avenue, you're desperately going to be misusing an asset that you have.
I mean, I literally want him to be the new Rod Serling. I would love to see him get in there and write, get in there and direct, get in there and narrate. We know he's doing that.
Yeah.
Don't just, I don't know, just use your talents, man. And
exactly.
He's got a lot of them. He's got a lot of them.
Exactly. Well, and so now that brings me to my second point. We've talked about a few different shows about dealing with this issue, but this is something that I've sort of just thought about as we've been discussing here, and it's something I've been thinking about. This is happening a lot. We're seeing a lot of reboots as of late.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of bringing back shows that necessarily aren't reboots. I'm just going to name off 5 things that have come back that were dead, in some way, shape, or form. I'm going to count Star Trek because, it seemed like they were very focused on the movie universe and the show came out of nowhere, right? Then you got Twilight Zone. We talked about Roseanne. You got fucking Last Man Standing with Tim Allen for some goddamn reason is back.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And then fucking Murphy Brown, again, a CBS show. It's almost like CBS is like, hey, all the old people are dead. We should bring back the shows.
This one I didn't know about. Are they bringing back? Are they bringing back same people or cancer?
Yes, literally the whole fucking cast is coming back, plus a young person, and it's just like, like I don't understand. Like, here's the thing: CBS has for a long time been out in front when it comes to being a leader in ratings on TV. They don't necessarily have every category cinched up when it comes to your big 4, your NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox. NBC does pretty well for themselves, and ABC they're good at what they want to do, right? But as of late, all these networks are sort of shaking things up, right? Like they want to do something different. You see this every once in a while. Hell, we're at a point now we have shows just flipping networks, right? Like fucking American Idol, which was a Fox show, is now fucking ABC. Fucking Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which was on Fox and was canceled, was mercifully saved by NBC. And it's just like, and don't get me wrong, I don't, in those instances, if you think that a show is good enough to stand on its own, it just wasn't being fostered well enough to, then yeah, by all means, take that product and do something with it. I mean, that's technically what happened with Last Man Standing too. It got canceled on ABC, and I remember there was a big fallout for that because Last Man Standing was getting pretty good ratings. A lot of people said, "Oh, it got canceled because it was conservative and yada yada." But I think for what ABC was doing, they didn't have a lot of they didn't have anywhere to put the show. It didn't fit into their lineup. And it's easy to say, well, they probably put a shittier show in. Yeah, the show they replaced it with was fucking Modern Family, which, let's be honest, Modern Family is a far superior show than Last Man Standing, and the numbers say it. But nonetheless, there's a lot of this rehashing of old ideas, and I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but it kind of upsets me a little bit because I think that, especially with the way that the internet is nowadays, there's a lot of talent that is out there, and there's a lot of talent that you can have access to, but it feels like they're just going, hey, I don't know what to do. Let me go call my old buddy and see what we can do to bring this back. Is that just me?
No, I totally get you, and I agree. I agree with you. I don't know. I'm of mixed mind on this because I don't know why it's exactly happening. I think it's a combination of things. Number one is basically that in the first 40 years of television, 50 years of television were basically creating something from nothing. And there wasn't anything for them to kind of work from other than, general genres and finding good writers and creating fiction, right? Or nonfiction in some cases. And now you've got this big backlog of all these TV shows, and the networks say, okay, what was popular? Let's give people more of that because it'll probably be popular again. Cross your fingers. The other thing is that I think it reeks a little bit of desperation in a lot of cases because there's so much more competition now with streaming. Especially with streaming. I mean, it was like you had your networks at first, and then cable came in, and that was a big issue. That was a big thing for the networks. But cable kind of latched onto specialty shows and movies, right? So the networks could still keep their TV shows in the in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, but now, I mean, you got Netflix out there just making some incredible shows, some not so much, but they're really knocking it out of the park. Amazon Prime's got their own stuff, so everybody's doing their own stuff. So I think it really reeks of desperation where they're just like, oh my god, everybody's off watching show X on Netflix and it's super popular. We got to get some of those eyes over here. Let's do a remake of Mr. Ed. I don't know.
Which I don't see them not doing. Like, you probably just gave somebody an idea by saying, like, "Oh shit, people want Mr. Ed. Let's do it."
They'll just CGI the horse.
Exactly, because PETA wouldn't allow for that nowadays.
But. Exactly, but yeah, it's just I see it so much. The other thing is, what do you hear about, right? Mm-hmm. I always hear people complain, especially about movies. It's all the movies are just superheroes and remakes and sequels. Superheroes and remakes and sequels. There's a lot of movies out there that are like all the movies that we remember, growing up, that our parents remember, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of movies that are out there still being made. It's just they're not. Nobody's hearing about them. They're going into theaters, and they're doing their 2-week run, and then they're going to video. And I assume that a lot of them are really great films. I don't get a chance to see a lot of movies these days because I have a young child. But how much are we missing? I guess there's hundreds. There's like 800 channels, 900 channels on cable at least at this point. And how much are we missing? I mean, me personally, I'm the kind of guy who used to watch just the educational channels. Then they stopped being educational. Yeah. Because
when TLC stopped being the learning channel. I get
it. And when History Channel became the channel about Pawn Stars or whatever, and when Animal Planet became the channel about backwoods guys who wrestle alligators. I don't even know, but
Yeah.
I used to watch them for or ancient aliens, that kind of stuff. But that actually kind of drove me away, but it drew a lot more people than it drove away. A lot of people came in. That's why reality shows are so popular. So I don't know. I think it's just a lot. There's a lot more competition. There's a lot more people out there trying to get eyes on their shows. And so, do I blame them? Yeah, a little bit, but not it. Not to the point where I can be too terribly upset, because I almost feel bad for them just grasping at those straws.
Yeah. Well, and the one thing I will say too is I feel like the problem with most networks is they don't figure out their identity and who their market is. And so they try to, like, especially the big four, right? A lot of
Oh,
times
yeah.
they try to appeal to everyone. And when you appeal to everyone, you'll appeal to no one when it comes to television, right? I mean, nobody, you don't go to, like, let's think about, like, your pay channels, right? Nobody watches, like, everybody watches HBO for the same slew of shows, right? And if you're watching it for shows, it's nobody's going there expecting wholesome content when you have shit like Westworld and Game of Thrones, right? Like,
Right.
there's gonna be some adult themed content, some grittiness, some sexual content in some shape or form, and if you're not into that, you don't go there. But that's the niche that HBO has fostered, and to their benefit, I will say. And again, going back to Last Man Standing, that's sort of what happened with them as well. Is they got rid of that show not because it was bad, but because they go, look, we want to appeal to a certain audience. Look, they want to appeal to audiences that liked The Bachelor and Grey's Anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
The people who watch The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, Grey's Anatomy are not watching Last Man Standing. It's just not happening. But they will
No.
watch Modern Family. So it's when you figure out what identity you want to have, that's what you should do, is go find new content and that fulfills that category. And usually you will be paid off. I think we talked about it last year. It was shows that got canceled, and even the end of the last TV season, we talked about shows that got canceled and shows that got renewed and all that stuff. But the big thing is, if you don't have shows that fit into the content that you're already showing, then it's really hard to get people to come to your channel for that one show, right? So, and this is why you have, back in the day when Seinfeld was on Thursday nights, it was with friends, right? Because, I mean, yeah, you may not watch both, but the likelihood that you watch both was much higher because they were very comparable shows.
The example that I always go to nowadays is the CW, right?
Oh,
absolutely. The CW knows, like, they have picked an audience. That audience is people who want to see supermodels playing teenagers in superhero shows.
Yep.
That's their audience. It's like,
it's a channel to see pretty people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I tried to watch what was it, The Flash, I think, and I'm just like, this is actually a really good show, but it distracts me that all these people are teenage supermodels.
I know, right? It's very distracting.
But that's their shtick, and it's like, hey man, more power to you. That's for the audience that you're looking for. And yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. That's the kind of thing that I think that people need to just kind of knuckle down and figure out what they want to show.
Exactly. But yeah, so it's, again, I think CBS All Access has given people a better reason to sort of pick it up. Problem is, I don't know when those shows are coming. And there was another benefit. If you like to watch, what's that show they have with, like, the people in the house? God damn it, I can't think of
Big Brother?
Big Brother, yeah. If you want to watch the all access behind the scenes version of Big Brother, where, like, literally they had the 24/7 feed for Big Brother, you get it with all access. So if you're into that, there you go. You got another reason. But I think I'm gonna be going there more for the Discovery and Twilight content myself.
I
So.
I will give them my $5 to $10 a month for Discovery and for Twilight Zone once Twilight Zone is out.
Yeah.
And I'm probably not going to pay attention to anything else, but that's me.
That's probably how that's going to work for me as well. But yeah, so enough of that. The next thing we want to talk about, we're going to sort of switch gears here, and we're going to go into video games. So this happened this week? End of last week?
Last week, I believe. Yeah.
I think either way. Video game studio Telltale. Which if you're not familiar with them, Telltale Studios was a video game company that made sort of choose your own adventure style games,
they're games. They're called graphic adventures. I mean, they're an older style of game that kind of resurged in popularity because of this company.
Yeah, but they did it in a very interesting manner, and with content that was definitely more adult themed. So one of the first ones they did was with the IP for The Walking Dead. And just to give you an idea of how that game would work. So let's say you're playing the game, and if you're familiar with The Walking Dead, it's post-apocalyptic world where zombies have taken over and yada yada yada. So let's say you are walking through an area, and then you happen upon somebody, and you say freeze, and they look at you, and you got them pinned in, and they look harmless, you just go, okay, never mind, I'm just gonna let you go, and you let that person go. Well, that they might go and get friends that come back and try to rob you. Maybe one person in your party dies, so but maybe you kill them and nothing happens because you took out a threat, but maybe you kill them and that's when the party comes after them. You don't really know until you play through, but it bring a lot of it presented a lot of consequences to your gameplay, which in this day and age where a lot of stuff is so linear, or if there is a story at all, it was really nice. But regardless,
it was a lot of choices, a lot of non-linearity, and a lot of good storytelling.
Oh, absolutely, and that's why people love Telltale so much, was the stories you would get, which all were for the most part original content, was so engaging, and you really cared for the characters in the story, and so that's what kept bringing you back.
Well, the thing about Telltale is everything that they did, to my knowledge, everything that they did was licensed, but all the actual stories were original. So the content was original, but they were all licensed IPs.
Yeah, which is how they got the audience for the other content. But they did have one, which was The Wolf Among Us. I don't think that was licensed.
Sorry, which one was it?
The Wolf Among Us.
That was a licensed, yeah.
It was?
It was from a comic book. It's a comic book called Legends.
Wait. Yeah, it was. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, it was licensed. And I think, we'll get to... we'll just keep going to the story. So, the problem is, they had been having financial troubles. They laid off a lot of employees about a year ago, and it basically came to a head where they basically just shut down the entire studio, sans maybe a crew of, I think the article says, they leaving behind a skeleton crew of 25 people to finish off work on a final project.
Yeah, they released everything in episodes, right? So they would have 5 sections of the game that were released over a period of time, right? So I think they were contractually obligated to finish at least the next episode, hopefully the rest of the current series that they're working on, but at least the next episode. If it's just the next episode, that's going to be kind of terrible because it'll just leave everything unresolved. Yeah. But I mean, what can you do when you've got something that went from 275 people to 25?
Yeah. And them losing their jobs isn't the biggest problem. The biggest problem is how they lost their jobs. essentially, we'll get into the culture there, but essentially what happened was, they brought everybody in, told them that they all were being let go. They had security there and were told they weren't allowed to get their things and they had to leave immediately.
Yeah, they had like 15 or 20 minutes of like to get out of the building.
Yeah, and they received no severance whatsoever, and basically I would say they were given a handshake, but I don't think they even got that. To be fair,
No, they were given no severance. Their health insurance ran out in 1 week, and there were like this was so out of the blue that they had people that had traveled from other countries to come work for them a week before as new hires.
Yeah. That was the most fucked up part, in my opinion. It sucks because, like, you know, and when you're hiring employees and they aren't there for a week and they're being laid off, there's some mismanagement going on. But
they picked up their entire lives, think about this. You're somebody out of Europe or Asia or whatever. I mean, people come out here for these jobs. They'll whether it's a long-term visa or not, they come out, their entire lives are uprooted with this expectation that they'll at least have a year's worth of gainful employment and then maybe they can get something else. But to come out, do all that stuff, pack up all their stuff, make all the logistics for that kind of move,
I know,
bring
right?
their families out, and then just like that.
And to also emphasize how out of the blue this had to be, there were reports that days later there were still employment recs out for openings at Telltale Games. Yeah. So I think it was just, and from what I understood, looking at a number of sources, what I think happened here was, Telltale had some investors that they were dependent upon at this point, who were backing a lot of the content that they were producing, that essentially backed out.
They reached the point
at a last minute.
They reached that point that no company of any size, but especially of a small to medium size, wants to reach, where they reached the point where they were dependent upon one single investor.
Yeah.
They were dependent on the money from one investor, and that dependence was, we get the money or we die. Yeah. And to have people in that position, and there's a lot of you read into this. There's a lot of history behind all this kind of stuff. We can get into that, but yeah, it's that seems to be where it came from. Is that they basically had this one angel investor and they just pulled out.
Yeah. And, and to be fair, I can sort of agree with, I can't, agree is not the word. I can sort of understand being put into that position where they essentially weren't expecting, that to happen. And then you just have to shutter the doors. But good God, it doesn't leave a good taste in your mouth. But I will say this, the one bright side from this is the industry has rallied around those guys, and there was a huge push to essentially help people who were fired find another job at another studio, to the point where hashtag Telltale Jobs was trending on Twitter, and basically what was happening was gaming studios who had openings simply would just tweet out information and use hashtag Telltale Jobs so that all those people who had been fired had a central location to go to find work.
This is one of the things about the games industry too, is that the games industry is not a very, from everything I've heard, it's not an easy, certainly, no. And very frequently not a very nice place to work. This is an industry in which people really are working for the love of what they do, rather than pretty much anything else. But something that I've noticed in the industry in general, this happens a lot, especially with high-profile studio closures. You will get this happening a lot, and the more kind of devastating the closure, the more the industry will kind of will rally around them. I think this happened with Gazillion like a year ago when the guys who made Marvel Heroes, like they just had to shut down. And so a lot of the folks out there, I mean, there were just people who everybody knows each other. Everybody networks. That's how it works, right?
Yeah.
So everybody just basically was like, hey, if you got an opening, I got some friends. If we've got an opening, hey, come interview with us, and so on and so forth. And they're really good about that in my experience. I mean, not my personal experience, but I know people who work in the industry. Yeah. And this was such a huge one that it's always heartwarming to see this, but especially with a particularly wrenching one like this.
Yeah. And again, it's I sort of alluded to it, but there apparently, when you get to a point where, again, you have a single investor backing you, you can imagine that the culture there wasn't the best. There were stories about, having to work, until 3 a.m., having... I'm trying to remember. There was a quote that somebody, because obviously after the fact, a lot of stories are coming out about people's experiences, and don't quote me on this, but I think there was a story of on one of the leading developers doors, like to his office, he had something that said, it's not about how much time do you have to make a good game. It's about how good of a game you can make with the time that you have. And for people who are passionate about what they do, that's so demoralizing to say, hey, don't worry about taking your time to make this be the product you want it to be. Just worry about getting something out so that way we meet our deadline.
Well, this is a great example with Telltale. Everybody's looking back on this with their 2020 hindsight, and they're looking at problems that Telltale had, not just the ones that are being reported now, but problems that were pretty much well known. I mean, they're looking at problems like, for a long time they had a CEO or a head of the studio that just there were issues with. Let's just put it that way. I don't know the details, so I don't want to cast aspersions, but it's also one of those situations where you have an environment like that, and you're not going to make good games. Here's the thing about Telltale: they had the talent, they had the ability, but something was going on there where they had basically two games. I should say between 2 and 4, but really two big games that were super good and super successful. The Walking Dead Season 1 and The Wolf Among Us. Yeah. Those two were gems, absolute masterpieces. But Telltale made a lot of games, and they made them all in the same vein. And some of them, like they had a Game of Thrones game, they had a Jurassic Park game, panned, apparently terrible. They had a Minecraft game, which was apparently not very good. Then they had, a Borderlands game, which apparently was pretty good, not as good as those other two that I mentioned. But where we run into a problem here is they make a lot of games. They may or may not do a particularly good job, mostly not. But when they do a good job, they do a really good one. But the problem is the really good one's the only one that's making them any money. And when you got one game out of 30 that's making you any money, then therein lies the continuing issue.
Yeah. So again, this is it's a sad story because there were even people, and there was at one point they said they had gotten enough funding to produce the last episode of The Walking Dead, because that game series was actually wrapping up, which is why it sort of hit people a little hard. What was that? The story was almost concluded,
For listeners who aren't familiar, they release them in seasons, and each season I believe is 5 episodes, and each episode is like
four
is like
or five.
Yeah, 4 or 5, and each episode is an individual little kind of a packaged game that is part of the overarching story for that season. I think this is season 3, and they had finished 1 episode out of 4 or 5, and they were working on the second, which is why there was the concern over are they going to shut it down after doing the second episode, which leaves you half a story not told, or are they going to be able to finish this season? So it sounds like you're saying that they did get funding for the rest of the season?
Well, so this is what happened. They said, we think we might be able to get enough to finish the rest of the season, but it got to the point where fans did what you normally don't expect fans to do. They started outcrying, saying, look, we don't want the rest of the season if you're not going to pay those people who you let go. There are people who are literally begging and pleading with them, look, I enjoy playing this game so much that I want those people to be treated properly, and I'd rather you pay them for the severance that they should have gotten and not have a finished game.
Yeah,
which says something, I think.
Yeah, I totally respect that. I totally back that up.
So, time will tell if anything will happen. Because obviously when it comes to any sort of investors, they might not give them the money because, if we're not going to make any money off of this, well, screw it. We just won't do it. But, it's in this day and age when, companies are coming and going and, it seems like you literally can blink and a company is gone, I think I do like that the greed and again, I don't think this was a greed thing. I think this was a survival thing, right? I think this was like, look, nobody's going to have a job if we don't do anything. So I think, but at the same time, to see fans actually be respectful of the content creators to the point where they're saying, look, and again, this isn't all the people, but there are enough people who were loud enough to say, no, I don't want the game if it means you're not going to pay the people who make it. That's very respectful in my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And this is and Telltale was it was a widely known name in the industry. I mean, this came out of the blue for a lot of people. It was. If you turn around and somebody says like, okay, Interplay went bankrupt. Well, that's expected. They haven't really done anything in 15 years and so on and so forth. But if, you turn around and say Telltale, which you're always hearing about, partially because they're always releasing these episodes, but, it sounds like a successful game because it's in the media, it's on the Steam pages, it's out there. So when I that morning when I saw like Telltale closed, I was just like, it's not
confused.
It's not a AAA studio, but they were a big indie studio.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's, we'll see what, I wish nothing but the best for all the former Telltale and even current Telltale employees, because, I mean, they're going to need jobs too, but hopefully, everybody's able to recover because they're in San Rafael, which is, it might as well be the Bay Area. And God knows out here, losing your job at the drop of a dime when you're not expecting it. It's one thing if they had been talking about it and it just happened, but this isn't how that went down. So
yeah.
Hopefully they're able to, recover.
I wish all the best luck to them, and I hope they all find their place. And I look forward to seeing what the people from Telltale create at other studios, because they'll be. I think they'll be nothing. Part. Yeah, I think they'll be nothing but a boon for somebody else.
I agree. All right, so we're about to hit or just over an hour mark here, so we should wrap things up. But I will say this: I do want to talk about one last thing. Across the country, voter registration is happening, and I want to be honest. I honestly don't care if you're Republican, if you're Democrat, if you're Independent, if you're Socialist, if you're Green, Blue. I don't really care. If you are a legal American citizen, and I think permanent residents, this applies to you too. But if you are able to register to vote, for the love of God, do so. Look, people, I'm not going to go into my spiel about it. about why you should. I think this past election cycle and a half, we've seen how important a few votes are.
Yeah, we've seen too many cases recently, especially in recent years, where it comes down to a couple hundred or even just a couple votes. So in almost every state, if not all of them, there is still time to register. So please go out and do so. You know, do your I don't want to say do your civic duty. That sounds kind of corny, but honestly, it's so important. With the political climate that we're in, it's so important for everybody to get out there, do their part. The polls open early. They close moderately late, but there should be enough time. A lot of employers will let you have a little time to go
do absentee ballots. Absentee ballots. Since I've been legally allowed to vote, I've only gone to vote in my actual voting center twice, and that's because I registered to vote through absentee too late. So you make life easy on yourself, but just vote. And what I'm going to do is this: I'm going to post a link on the show page to various forms of information that will show you how and where to register to vote. But also, too, I'm going to be tweeting out, I got to gather some data, but I'm going to be tweeting out some various sites where you can look up what you're voting on. A lot of people don't like to vote because they said, I feel uneducated or I don't feel like I'm confident enough. I want to know what I'm voting for before I do. I'm going to try to get that for you guys, okay? Because I want people to understand, because look, let's be honest, there's certain things that the way that they verbalize it is to deceive you, right? So I want you to feel like you're not going to be hurting your cause by voting the wrong way. So I'm going to try to get that content for you guys too. But regardless, it doesn't matter even if you register to vote and you don't get that information, you don't have to vote, but at least get yourself in the position that if you feel like you've gathered enough information, you have an opinion on how you want to do it, you have the opportunity to do it. Because look, we talk about Trump and Russia all the time, but if this was Russia, your shit literally wouldn't count for anything. So, let's actually use the right to vote that we all have. Again, if you are legally allowed to do so in the United States. But regardless, let's do it, guys. I think we can all agree that no matter what side you're on, Republican, Democrat, that we can do better. And the only way we're going to do better is if we get the people in that we want to be there.
Absolutely.
So, there we go. But again, I'm going to post that everywhere. And again, I'm going to give you all the spiel. You got Instagram, Twitter, @that1pod. Email us, pod@gmail.com. Find the show page at shows.PIPPA.io/that1podcast. And my main man, Mark, go ahead and give your information out as well, if you don't mind.
So I'm just going to repeat what I did, what I talked about earlier. I have a Twitch channel, which is pretty bare bones right now, but I'm working on it. I didn't cover this earlier, but I mostly play kind of chill. I mostly do kind of chill streams, just kind of relaxation streams. I do a lot of kind of tycoon games, management, stuff like that. The kind of stuff that some people don't like to play, but they might like to watch. So that will be at twitch.tv/tycoonatic. That's the word tycoon with an ATIC on the end. And yeah, that's basically all I've got to say for right now. If I got any other sort of social media, maybe I'll share it on the page or share it in a later podcast if Marvin decides to have me back.
Yeah, of course. And shoot me the links to stuff so that way I make sure I don't screw it up too, even though I think I got it all.
Yeah, so. You got it. Yeah,
cool. All right. Well, everybody, thanks again. Hope you enjoyed the show. Sorry that it took so long, but we're gonna be mixing things up a little bit because we got work-life stuff going on here, so. We're going to try to make sure we get content out to you guys as we can. But in the meantime, as always, be nice to one another. Bye.
Be excellent. Bye, everyone.